All right, y'all, Kamala Harris's speech last night, let's break it down. So overall, I would say there was one part of the speech which I would classify as mid, one part that I think was very good, and then one part that I thought was absolutely horrific. So let's start with the mid portion. At the very beginning of the speech, she went very, very heavy on her personal biography. Now, normally I'm kind of against it when politicians lean into that sort of stuff, mostly because it's like, nobody really cares about you. They care about what you're going to do for the country, what you're going to do for them, right? But in this instance, she kind of pulled it off because she used her personal biography to link it to saying, I'm just like you, right? She was telling the American people, yes, I have a unique story, but it's actually not that special in the sense that we all have our personal stories, and I'm in here because I'm going to represent people like you. So in other words, it was sort of like the anti-Hillary Clinton approach to talking about personal biography. Hillary brings up personal biography to be like, me, I'm so glorious, me. Whereas Kamala was more like, this is my personal biography, and I'm just like you, and I'm going to represent people like you. Okay, so overall, I would classify that as mid. The problem with it was I think it dragged on a little bit too long, talking about herself and all the people that she knows. At a certain point, it's sort of like, okay, wrap it up and move on to the more serious stuff. All right, so that's the mid portion. The good portion, in all seriousness, is the entire part where she went after Donald Trump. She was way more sharp and way more vicious than I expected her to be. She was definitely on point. She was saying things that were factually accurate. She highlighted how, look, this is an unserious guy in many respects, which is a nod to Tim Walt's weird line. But also, let's keep it real, he's an extremist and he's an authoritarian. And she referenced multiple things, including January 6th, including Trump trying to invoke the Insurrection Act to deploy the U.S. military against our own citizens. And she also said, I think this is totally a fair point, that, look, last time there at least were some guardrails, because there were people who were around him that would push back a little bit. But this time there are going to be no guardrails, because he's only going to pick the loyalists to be in his administration, so he's going to do whatever he wants. It's going to be government based off Donald Trump's whim. And we all know he wants to be an authoritarian. He has praise for authoritarians all the time. The other week, he very famously praised Xi Jinping for ruling with, quote, an iron fist. He said it as if it was a good thing. He's praised China for executing drug dealers and things of that nature. So she goes through, in a very clear way, prosecutes the case against Trump. And I think by far that was the best portion of the speech. Now, the bad part of the speech. Man, the entire foreign policy section was horrific. So she had one line about how we're going to have the biggest military in the world, and it's like, okay, any U.S. president would say that. But then she says, it's going to be the most lethal in the world. It's like, whoa, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? She really played up this. I think she's overcompensating for, the perception of the American public she fears and her staffers fear is first black female president. She's going to be soft. She's not going to be, tough on the international stage. And she really overcompensated and was like, oh, we're going to be the toughest you've ever seen ever. And so that portion I thought was terrible. On Israel-Gaza, I'm going to give you the direct quote. Here we go. With respect to the war in Gaza, she said, President Biden and I are working around the clock because now is the time to get a hostage deal and a ceasefire deal done. So right off the bat, that's a lie. If you want to get Israel to stop massacring Palestinians, cut off the weapons. That's it. That's it. So that's bullshit. They're not working around the clock. They're doing PR around the clock while behind the scenes giving a green light to Netanyahu. She continues, and let me be clear, I will always stand up for Israel's right to defend itself, because the people of Israel must never again face the horror that a terrorist organization called Hamas caused on October 7th, sexual violence, and the massacre of young people at a music festival. All right, let me break that down for you. The part where I'm always going to stand up for Israel's right to defend itself, that is her broadcasting, or at the very least implying, I'm not going to change the Biden policy. I'm going to keep sending money. I'm going to keep sending weapons. If you invoke Israel's right to defend itself at the time where Israel has been committing a genocide for months, that's you saying, I think this kind of falls under the category of them defending themselves, even though it doesn't. So that is horrific. Then to bring up the sexual violence thing is just, oh my God, I don't even have the words for it, because we just got video of the IDF soldiers in concentration camps raping Palestinians with metal rods and the Palestinians dying. In fact, there's an open debate happening in the Israeli government and in Israeli society right now. Do we have a right to rape our Palestinian prisoners? And a majority of the population and the government is saying, yes, we do. It's been documented there are 42 different kinds of torture happening at these Israeli concentration camps. So to bring that up in the context of Hamas sexual violence, when it is literally systematic in Israel against Palestinians, is inexcusable. All right, more. She says, at the same time, note the language here, guys. She's going to talk about Gaza. Note the language. At the same time, what has happened in Gaza over the past 10 months is devastating. So many lives lost, desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety over and over again. The scale of suffering is heartbreaking. So note the language. It is very, very passive. She's talking as if Palestinians were hit by a natural disaster and there's nothing we can do about it. No, it is a campaign of extermination and annihilation on purpose, and Israel is carrying it out. Guys, compare the part in the speech on Ukraine to the part on Israel and Palestine. On Ukraine, it's unequivocal language. They were invaded wrongly by an offensive threat. We're on their side. We're going to defend them. And then she gets to Israel-Palestine, and the language is, well, we kind of have to see both sides. We got to look at both sides. And it's like, she acts like there aren't over 40,000 dead Palestinians, 90% civilian death rate, hospitals bombed, schools bombed, UN buildings bombed, concentration camps set up, a total blockade and siege where there's no food, fuel, water, electricity, etc. for 2.3 million Palestinians. She acts like 70% of Gaza at least hasn't been wiped off the map. It has. So this is weaselly bullshit language. And then finally she says, President Biden and I are working to end this war, that's a lie, such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination. Now, people are taking that last part and saying, oh, she brought up Palestinian self-determination. She's breaking with Biden on this issue. Guys, that's 100% not true. Almost every time Biden talks about this issue, he brings up a two-state solution. He brings up Palestinian self-determination. He just doesn't mean it. It's PR. It's sophistry. It's the humanitarian human rights language that they put out there while at the same time continuing to arm and fund Israel and give them a green light behind the scenes to do whatever the fuck they want to do. Guys, look, bottom line is this. Putting aside the obvious morality of this and the ethics of this, put that aside, which we shouldn't do, but we're going to do just for argument's sake here. From a raw political calculation perspective, not just Joe Biden, but Kamala Harris should be openly saying we're going to cut off the money and the weapons to Israel. Why? Because it's very likely that the October surprise this year is going to be Netanyahu attacking Iran, knowing he's going to draw the U.S. in to fight that war for him. Then boom, we have a big war with Iran right before the election. And who do you think that helps in the election? It would help Donald Trump because Joe Biden would get the blame, and maybe Kamala would also get some of the blame too. And we all know Netanyahu wants Trump to win. We all know that. So, I mean, this part was horrible. By the way, another part which was disgusting was on Iran. She was doing warmongering. And it's like, bro, it was Barack Obama who did the Iran nuclear agreement, and it was fucking working. Then Donald Trump came in, ripped up that agreement, escalated tensions, killed a top Iranian commander, and Israel is offensively attacking the political wing of Hamas in Tehran, Iran, on their soil, attacking in Beirut, Lebanon, Hezbollah commanders. Israel is starting all the shit in the world. And then instead of doing a clean break and saying, we're going to bring back the Iran nuclear agreement, we're going to use diplomacy and negotiation, we're going to get peace, etc. Instead of doing that, it's, we're going to stand up to Iran and their proxies. It's amateur shit. And it leads me to believe she'll keep the exact same policy as Biden, and she will be led by the generals who, of course, never met a war they didn't like. So it's horrible, man. Look, again, on attacking Donald Trump, she did great. The biography stuff was mid. Honestly, when it comes to economic policy, I think it's fair to say she'll at the very least keep the Biden path on track, which has been way better than Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, right? But on foreign policy, it's looking now like she'll just be a continuation of Joe Biden. And for a lot of people, that's a no-go, dog. They're not going to overlook that. All right, so now let me give you what the people say. So CNN had a swing voter panel that they did afterwards. here are the grades that these swing voters gave Kamala for her speech. B plus, B, B plus, A, B plus, A, C. So overall, look, the reaction from the public so far has been positive, and I do think she's going to get a 3-point bump coming out of this convention. So she did what she had to do, but understand that the language around Gaza and Israel was incredibly immoral, and she was promising to be very, very hawkish on foreign policy, and that is disturbing. Because understand something, guys, a lot of the rush of young voters and Arab Americans and Muslim Americans back to Kamala when they weren't supporting Biden was because they felt, hey, maybe she'll be a little bit different on the issue of Gaza, right? But she's kind of broadcasting that's not the case. All right, so finally here, Trump responds to the speech. He called into Fox News. He was rambling on his cell phone, and he kept babbling, and he wasn't, like, responsive to the questions of the anchors, Martha McCallum and Brett Baer. And so they basically had to, like, kick him off. They had to, like, go to the next show or cut to break. It was a hard out, and they just had to, like, just kick him off the show because he just wouldn't shut the fuck up. So he's definitely melting down. Then, by the way, so Trump went from calling into one Fox News show to calling into Newsmax to bitch and moan and vent, and then calling into back on a Fox News show to Greg Gutfeld, where Greg Gutfeld answers his cell phone in the show and says, "Don't say anything damaging to yourself." Oh my God. He's acting like a psychotic ex-boyfriend who refuses to take the hint, who refuses to realize, nah, bro, this shit is over. Like, relax, it's done. He won't do it. So he certainly felt like the speech went well for Kamala. And again, overall, I think the public reaction is going to be somewhat positive. She seems very confident and competent, and she's way more comfortable in her skin than she was back in 2020, where she seemed very plastic. So overall, she did what she had to do from the public's perspective. But from my perspective, the stuff on foreign policy was really, really, really bad.